Guys, this video deals with the topic of reading comprehension, which forms a part of the English syllabus. Okay, so first of all, some very general tips. The very first thing is find a suitable approach for yourself. Whether you want to first read the questions and then the passage or the other way around. The second is focus on the keywords of the passage, what they are asking, whether they are asking whether which particular statements is correct or incorrect, true, false. Focus a lot on these, and also some extreme options are there like only and none. So most of the times they should be avoided. You should be very sure if you are marking such an answer. Okay, and the next step is many times question comes regarding to identify the tone of the author or tone of the passage. So it depends on what you get out of the passage, what essence do you get. It may be critical, analytical, descriptive, positive, negative, etc. The difference between critical and analytical is that in analytical you don't take sides, you don't tell what things you favor. Okay, and the next thing is make a list of the possible tones like sarcastic, sanguine, cynical, nostalgic, etc., and learn their meanings. So basically a vocabulary plays a very important role in this aspect, and you can find these lists on the internet or any coaching classes notes that you may have. Okay, so so a very good thing is that now you have an offline paper, so you can very easily skim through the passage. You can see how long the passage is, how many questions are asked, so you can calculate the cost to benefit ratio. It will take around 7-8 seconds. See, so if it is too long and it has only 3-5 questions, then leave it for the end. But you think that it is long but you have a good reading speed and the passage seems easy, like in the very first glance, then you can go ahead with that. And if it has 10 questions but you think that the language is too verbose and difficult, then attempt only when you're very sure of your verbal abilities. Otherwise, you'll tend to waste a lot of time and you may get a lot more negatives also. Okay, so this art of choosing what to attempt, what not to, comes with practice a lot of reading comprehensions. So in this video, we'll discuss two comprehensions from CLAT and AILET, and I'll teach you tips while solving the question so you'll have a better idea of the examination. Okay, so first we'll do the CLAT. Okay. Mm, this was a very easy passage. I mean, this was actually that cherry thing that we talk about. So, in this, what I did was I first read the questions and then went to the passage because I felt the questions were very like super easy, and in this way you can save a lot of time. You just okay, so like I'll just tell you how to like go about it. So the very first question is, how is Internet of Things a concept of connecting? Okay, just quickly we'll skim through. It is said we look at time differently now. Why? Okay, um, the patient physician relationship. Just focus on keywords. Okay, sporting field. Okay, preventive measures. Okay, then um, major concerns. Okay, then we have how it benefited education. Okay, this is important in this. And then we have teachers regarding. Okay, then we have title. Okay, and and okay, so the fields in which it had impact. So it took a very few minutes, and you just skimmed through it. Okay, now what you do is when you read the passage now, then these terms, they will stay in your memory for some time, and when you read the passage these terms will click. See, these techniques work only when the passage is easy or you have a good memory for that matter. It doesn't really work when the passage has a lot more essence. Okay. Okay, so okay, let's go to the very first question. How it is a concept of connecting. Okay, then you come and you see the very first line that anything that is on a button and is connected to internet. So it's very obvious that the answer is second, that is it is the internet but connected to anything. It's actually, this passage was so easy that you could actually, just pick up lines from the passage and answer. This is actually a boon. Okay, now we look at time differently. So we have this line. Okay, so this says that watches can be connected to so many things, and so therefore this. So the answer is like obviously the first one. It is connected to different devices. Now, if we move on to third one, the patient-physician relationship. Okay, so here you can see you read the question, and when you read the passage, doctors will click. So this is the very first line. It means that doctors will be able to connect better with the patients, and therefore this is there. Okay. Now we move on to the next question. See, I'm doing it fast just to give you an idea of how simple this was and how quickly this should be solved. See, what happens in CLAT is if you get an easy paper, it isn't about getting right answers. It is just about getting the right answers in the quickest possible time. I think that is what makes or breaks, and that is what toppers do differently from other people. Okay, now the spotting field. Okay, so in spotting field they talked about how chips are attached. So this was also a very direct answer. So the answer is 3. Okay, now the fifth question, preventive measures. So if you look at this line, show signs of stress and strain, they just said that these will be able to detect the signs, and therefore um, the injuries can be detected earlier than possible. So it's also a very direct answer, that is 4. Now the major concerns. So see what happens. See, I told you about the extreme words, right? So here you can see that 2, 3 and 4 have the word only. Okay, these are very extreme things. So that's what I thought. Before marking these type of answers, think a lot. So this can also be like directly tracked to this blue highlighted area. Okay, now now we move on to another question. It is how it benefited the field of education. This, so we will just look at this part, that to keep up with this need, the need of the changing world. Okay, so the answer is 4, obviously. Okay, help in keeping it with the change in learning. Now teachers can, this again the same technique. The answer is 4. This only thing you just like think a lot before marking that. Now this question. So this question is very easy, but you need to eliminate. So the very first thing is curse or boon. You look at the passage, it doesn't really talk about curse. So this can't be. Now move on to third is changing the way we learn. This is true, but this line does not speak for the whole of passage. It just speaks for one para. Okay, and all pervading is too generalistic. Like the essence is met with the second option only, IoT and a life tomorrow. Okay, now we move on to our last question. It has impact on, so this is like a, it's a super easy question again. All the fields were included in that. Okay, so okay, so now we will take a passage from the AILET thing. Okay, so I think this is one of the most confusing passages of the past year papers. So this will give you a good idea of how to handle difficult passages. Okay, so the so these kind of passages can't be solved with the previous technique that we saw. First reading the questions and then, so like if you just have a look at the questions and options, they are very long. Like you will just waste a lot of time. And this passage depends a lot on the essence, on the concepts. Okay, it's related to economy. Okay, so this is a very short passage. You'll probably like, you should actually first read it and then we'll go on to the questions. Okay, so I'm giving you 2-3 minutes. Just have a like casual read, try to understand what the author is saying, and then we'll move forward. Okay. I hope you guys are done till employment. Okay. Okay, so now you must have seen it's a very complex passage, but I'll tell you how. See, you don't have to write a thesis on this passage. Don't worry if you don't get it. Okay, you just have to mark one option from the four, and that can be done easily. Okay, the okay, so the very first question is, give an appropriate title to the passage. So for these questions, this basically deals with the purpose of the passage, and the purpose can be found in either the introduction or the conclusion in most cases. So, like in this case, you see the intro clearly talks about the blue highlighted part. The articles bring together an interesting body of research that seeks to understand and explain the types of changes that have accrued in the structure of rural labor markets over the last few decades. So it deals with the changing structure of the rural labor market. So option D is a very clear answer. Okay. Now, what the author does not say, this is actually a very easy question. If you see this line, increasing number of women employed at very low wages. But the option C talks about there is no gender bias. So obviously option C is the answer. Here what you need to look at as what he does not say. What I said, focus a lot on keywords, otherwise you'll get it wrong. Okay, now the next question is, the increasing gap between the labor productivity in agriculture and non-agriculture occupations is a cause of concern. Then why is it a cause of concern? Okay, so this can be found in, okay, so this can be found in in these lines. See, they are basically saying that if what happens is that if agriculture and non-agricultural both have uh, different levels of wages and income, then the area which will have higher wages, people will move on to that sector. So that will be crowded, overcrowded. So that is what the problem is. Now option B beautifully brings out the problem that this would lead to pressure on both the sectors. As which sector expands at the expense of other, there would be an increased labor pressure on that sector. Okay, and when the labor from move from one sector to another, the sector that it is leaving, it will be left without any labor, so it will not develop. So this question can be easily solved if you just read the option B. It makes logical sense. Okay, now we move on to this question 4. How does Bhala explain the fact that real wages are real wages of the laborers began to rise in all parts of the country after mid 1970s. Now, if you see this part, okay, Bhallas argues that correlated with increase in employment and all that. So you can see this option D. There was a mass outflow, and the remaining laborers who were lesser in numbers now appropriated the existing agriculture sector wealth, getting richer individuals. So what they are saying is that when laborers from the agricultural sector went into non-agricultural sector, then less laborers were left in the agriculture sector, so they distributed wealth among themselves, so they also got richer. So again, if you see this, if you read the options, this actually makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now, if we move on to another question, what is the most important problem in understanding the condition of rural labor markets in India? Now, if we look at this, it is mentioned that um, the structure and working of labor markets is complex and is well known, and there is great diversity across regions and all. And so it is mentioned in option B. Okay, but it doesn't really tell about why it is the most important problem. Okay, so how can we derive at the answer B? So option A, C, and D are not even mentioned. So option B is mentioned. So this is actually a very logical answer. You can't really mark something which is not even mentioned. Okay, or not even talked about. Now the next question: what sort of tension exists between the decline of poverty and slow growth of agriculture and employment and the increased casualization of labor force? So this option can be solved if you get to the essence of the um, paragraph. It talks about that if the labor force in the agricultural sector increases, then there will be disguised unemployment. You must have studied about disguised unemployment. In like it is basically about if there is a small farm in which it requires only 3 people to work, but there are 5 people in the family and they are working, and the rest 2 people, they are not getting job anywhere, so they are also working, but in effect they are not, like, they are doing work but they are unemployed because they are not even needed to do that work. So this is what the essence of the whole passage is. So option A is a very direct answer. Okay, now we move to question 7. So this is a very easy question, like it all talks about the economics, so option C is the right answer. Okay, social commentary cannot, it doesn't really touch about social commentary, it just produces statistics and reasons, doesn't really comment on the situation. Okay, the author does not say which of the following statements in the passage. um so this you can do by elimination. There is not really a very short technique about about this, but what happens is that this takes a lot of time because you have to read it again and again. But if you like understood the essence of the passage, option B can be a very direct answer because the author doesn't really talked about the relation between the three sectors. It just mentioned agriculture, non-agriculture sector, how it the balance changes. Doesn't really touch upon that area. Okay. Now the last question is that Why are changes in the working living conditions at most significant to the country as a whole? This this is actually a very direct question. If you just see this thing, the change, uh, the very first para, the changes in the working and living conditions are thus central to changes in the welfare rural population and the country as a whole, because there is 60% were manual workers. They are single largest occupational category. So option C is a very direct answer. Okay, so like what I want to say is that in reading comprehensions, these type of questions, you really need to work very smart. Skim through the pages in like sorry, skim through the pages in like 10 seconds, and after that you see whether you'll be able to do or not. So personally, if I share throughout the monks, I used to get very less accuracy in RC. So on the day of examination, um, I went there with the mindset that I won't really attempt RC very at the very first instance because I wasted a lot of time and a lot of negatives. But then when I saw the passage, it was so easy that I attempted it. So you don't really go there with a set mind, okay? So don't restrict yourself to a particular strategy. It should change with the different type of reading comprehensions that you get. And as much you practice, that much less time you will take to gauge the potential of the passage, okay? So thanks a lot and all the best for your preparations.